Hello and welcome to today's Vue tutorial. Today we will be making a to-do app that allows the user to add, modify, and delete items. The items will be saved to local storage. We will start off with a fresh Vue app created with the npm create Vue latest command. You can find this command in the official Vue page under the Quick Start section. We will begin with a little bit of cleanup. I will remove the default components in the icons folder, as well as the contents in the assets folder. Then I will move to app.vue and leave just a header tag with the text hello. In main, I will remove the import for the CSS that we've deleted since we will not use it, and I will also remove the Vue DevTools in the vite.config file. Back in the browser, this will leave us with a blank page with the text hello when we run the app with the npm run dev command. Back to VS Code, I will remove the header tag and do a div with a class main content. In the style section, we will import the inner font from Google and give our body some default styling. For the main content, we will create the outline for our app by giving it a background color with opacity and some high width and border radius. In the browser, this will create a nice frame for our app, and now we can begin implementing the input box for our items. Before we begin with the item input, I will drag and drop the assets for this tutorial into the assets folder. You can find the assets in the repo under the video. Firstly, I will create a new component named item input. I will remove the lang property but keep the style scoped. In the template, we will have an outer div with class content. This will give an outer layer to the input and help us align it with the add button. Hence, we will have another div inside with the class search and an image with the Add PNG. We will keep the input data in a data property named NewItem. I will add a height and width to the image equal to 55 pixels in a style tag here. I think it's more readable that way, but feel free to move this CSS to the style section if you prefer. To begin styling the input, I will set our content to have display flex, justify content center, align items center, give them a little bit of gap, and push it from the top with padding top. For our search, we will have a greenish background color, add some border radius, some width and height, and a box shadow. I will also set this to be display flex. For the input, I will give it unset in order to remove the default styling, set the color to white, and add some left padding. The input placeholder should also be white. I will set our image button to have a cursor pointer, and will also reduce the opacity when the button is hovered for a responsive effect. Actually, require should not be used here, so let's remove it. Now let's import our item input inside our app and check out how it looks. In our browser, we now have a search input and add button with a hover effect. We can now proceed with creating a container for our items and an item component for each entry. Just before we do that, I will really quickly add a line under our input so we have a clear separation between the input and the items container. I will create two divs, one that will help me with the position of the line and one that will be the line itself. Now the items container will be pretty simple. I'm going to start off by creating a new component named item list. Inside it, we will just have a div to hoist each individual item. For the styling, I will just add some margin top and set the height for the container. I will also add overflow Y so the list can become scrollable and will remove the scroll bar. Now we will proceed with the item. I will create component named item that will have a div with class main. Our item will have two sections, one for the item value and one for the item buttons. So we will add div left for the value and div right for the buttons. now, I will just add the word item in div left and add the buttons from our assets for div right. As for the styling, our item will have a yellowish background. I will squeeze it a bit inside the container by giving it margin left and right, and to make some space between each item, I will give it padding top. Each item will have display flex, justify content space between, a line item's center, border radius of 15 pixels, max height of 2.5 m, and box shadow. For the left section, which will hold our value, we will have margin left of 1 EM in color white. For the right section, which holds our buttons, we will have display flex, a gap of 1 EM, and margin right 1 EM. I will also add a height and width of 30 pixels and cursor pointer for our image buttons. Okay, now that we have most of the design ready, we can continue with programming the functionality of our app. We will begin by allowing the user to add items. We will hold our items in an array named items holder. We will also create an add item function that will take each item as a parameter and push it into our array. list component that we have so we can use it as a container for our items, I will place it just under the div with class line that we've created. We can now pass the items holder as a prop to our items list component. I will also pass our add items function into our item input component so we could emit this event by pressing the add button. Inside our item input component, in the method section, I will add a function named add data to list. This function will check if our input field is not empty, and if it's not, it will emit our add items function that we've passed. Our trigger will be the click of the add button that we've created. Now let's move to our item list. We are already passing the items holder as a prop, so we have access to our items. I will also add the item component that we've created earlier. Now, in order to visualize each item in our div, I will use V4 for each entry in our item holder. I will also bind the index and the item itself. Now let's quickly check everything before we hop into the browser and test our function. And it looks like I made a small error here. The item list component should be outside of this div. Now let's hop into our browser and see what we have. As we can see, when I add value into our input, the new item is being added. Right now, we just have item as a value because we haven't passed the actual item string yet. the items also appear a bit off. Let's fix this really quickly by adding padding bottom inside our main class for our item component. This looks better. Let's add the actual item value now and proceed with the rest of the functionalities. Okay, so first thing first. In order to show the actual value for our item, we can go straight to the item component. Since we are already past the item as a prop, we need to just display it in our div with class left. Now we can implement the delete logic. We are going back to app. In here, I will add a new function named handle remove item, which will take the index of the item as a parameter, and then we just need to splice one element from the item's holder array from the item index in order to remove the selected item. Now we will pass the function the same way we did for our item input, but this time we will pass it in our item list component. We need to add the handle remove item function again in our item list component, which will emit the function in our app component. But since we will trigger it in our item, we need to pass it again. I will create a function again in our item component, which will emit the remove item, and finally we can call the remove item function when the button delete is pressed, which should update our item holder list based on the item index. small typo here should be methods. And it looks like I forgot the value for our items holder array. Back in our browser, now we can add different items. And when I press the delete button, they should be removed as well. For the edit functionality, we will again start from the app component, where we will add a function named handleEditItem. The function will accept index and a new item as a parameter. We will simply splice our items holder array at the item index and change the item value with the new item. Now from here, we will pass the function similarly to the handleRemoveItem function. In our items list component, we will again emit and pass the function down to our item component. In our item component, I will add two data values. The first will be a Boolean named as editing, which will be false by default. The second will be named editedItem, which will be equal to the current item. Now I will copy our left div and add VEF. I want to show the item value when I'm not editing the current item. When I'm editing, however, I want to show an input instead that will allow me to set new value. Our input will have vModel to our edited item, and I want to save the changes when I press enter or lose focus of the input. So I will add on KeyUpEnter and blur that will call the save item function. For our save item function, we will use the same validation as for our add item function. We will simply check if the input is not empty and emit the edit item by passing the index and the new value. Now for our buttons. I want to show our edit button when we are not in editing mode, and when it's pressed, I want to inverse the editing status. I will copy this and display the same button when editing, but this time when clicked, it will trigger the Save Item function, so we will have a button for save. And lastly, the Delete button should not be visible when we are editing item value. I want to just add a quick touch-up for our input. I will unset all default styles, add a greenish color, give it a border radius, and some padding. Now our app can add, modify, and delete items. Finally, to save our items in local storage, we will create a new function named Save Items to local storage. Inside it, we will save our items holder array in the form of a JSON object. We will need to call this function each time we modify the item's holder array. And to make sure the items will be loaded at the beginning, we will check if there are any items stored in local storage on mount. With the last few adjustments, now our app can add, modify, and delete items. Our items are also stored in local storage, so even after refreshing, the user can come back to its items. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more awesome content. And if you have any thoughts or questions, drop them in the comments below. Until next time, and as always, stay positive, stay creative, and I'll catch you in the next one.